Hello, everyone. What you're about to listen to is an old episode of a podcast I used to host called Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. My name is Robert Winfree. You'll be hearing a lot more from me shortly. This episode looks at one of my favorite, not my all-time favorite, but one of my favorite properties from when I was a child. I think just kind of timing-wise, I wound up more as a Ninja Turtles guy than a Transformers guy, but I did very much love the Transformers. And that's the subject of this particular episode. The ups, the downs, the pros, the cons, the good guys, the bad guys more in particular when it comes to the Transformers franchise. So, various iterations of them. Talk a little bit about Leonard Nimoy voicing Galvatron in the original animated movie. Ditto Orson Welles as Unicron. I still don't know how they pulled that off. Then again, Orson Welles would lend his voice to a lot of stuff, but a lot more talent went into that particular project than I think a lot of people realize. So, a little bit of that. And all the usual stuff and goodness from Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. So, thank you very much as always for listening. Please engage with the product in any way you can or that you feel is appropriate. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. With that out of the way, original air date. June 27th, 2014. Man, I am old. Feel it more and more every year, don't you? If you don't, you will. That comes for us all. All right. Past me. Take it away. Hope you all enjoy the show.
When the devil is too busy and death's a bit too much, they call on me by name, you see, for my special touch. To the gentlemen, I'm misfortune. To the ladies, I'm surprise. But call me by any name, anyway, it's all the same. I'm the fly in your suit, I'm the pebble in your shoe, I'm the bee beneath your bed, I'm a bump on every head, I'm the heel on which you slip, I'm a pin in every head, I'm the thorn in your side, makes you wriggle and writhe, and it's so easy when you're evil. This is the life you see, the devil tips his hat to me, I do it all because I'm evil, and I do it all for free. Your tears are all the pay I'll ever need.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. I am your host, your resident authority on evil, Robert Winfree, and thank you also very much for coming to this podcast. You've got probably millions of choices. I'll say millions, especially if bilingual, or if you have more than one language that you understand. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of just English-speaking podcasts. You branch out into some of the other languages, French, Japanese, Italian, wherever you go with it, your options open up exponentially more, and I appreciate you choosing this one. So thank you so very much for that. And I'll get a little bit of self-promotion out of the way here. If you like the show, thank you very much. And please, tell a friend if you think they'd like it. I can all the, listens are fun, all that good stuff. So spread the word if you like the show, if you know people who you think would like it. I appreciate it a great deal. All right. Before we dive right into tonight, and we've got some fun stuff ahead of us, I have one brief thing I want to touch on really briefly, before we jump into the Decepticons here. Okay, a little bit ago, about an hour, I was downstairs and I was looking over my bookshelf, and I stumbled across a collection of Calvin and Hobbes entitled Homicidal Psycho Jungle Cat. And I pulled it down and I read it because I love Calvin and Hobbes. I think there's something wrong with you if you don't. And I was just struck again by how awesome it is. The artwork, the jokes, in some cases the, philosophical messages. It's great. And I was reminded of that, and that I need to get the complete set. I would love to just get the collected, linear, A to Z books that contain all of that because it's that awesome. But the point here is, if you're out there parents, or if you're just, a much older sibling, nephews, young people in your life, please introduce them to Calvin and Hobbes. Because, it's awesome. And it's something that needs to keep going. And I know a lot of people out there like it. I just think, pass it on. It's one of those things that if you like and you enjoy, take it to, your kids, your brothers, your nephews, all that, and pass it on a little, because there's a lot of great stuff in it. So there's my suggestion, my request to you, my loyal listeners, or my first-time listeners, or even if you just haven't read it in a while. Find it. Go to the library and get a collection. Great. Again, just a lot of fun stuff you had there. All right. There's your feel-good moment out of the way. On to the villains. Hooray, villains. Because that's what we're really here to talk about. Everyone loves a bad guy. All right. If you would like to call in, if you're listening live, and God bless, I always say that, and I do mean it. I appreciate anyone who takes the time to listen live to these, because I broadcast them live. A lot of these are recorded. Some of them do take calls anyway, but completely live here. I don't even have a producer. This is all me. So, if you'd like to call in, you have some thought on the Transformers and the Decepticons specifically, because they're the villains, the number to do so is 323-657-0901. One more time, 223-657-0901. Excuse me there. And I will do my darndest to make sure you get on the air. I don't anticipate being swamped with calls. If I have 1,000 of them, I can't make any promise. But if you got any thoughts on, general, their villains in particular, here's a forum for everybody out there. And anyone out there listening after the fact who thinks that they might want to call into any of these, it's every Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's when I do this. They're not all call-in shows. Some of them are, some of them aren't. But if you'd like to kind of be aware, if you'd like to maybe plan that, consider it. I know I pick a horrible time. Friday night, Friday evening, everyone would rather be out doing something else. But there's your thought. And if you're interested, that's the time frame. And if I give out the number, it's a call-in show. So feel free to call in tonight, everybody. Again, 323-657-0901. All right, on to Transformers and the evil Decepticons who plague the existence of the Autobots. I was a big Transformers fan. Probably my second favorite franchise, and that includes, toys, film, the whole nine yards. That came out of the 80s. I was born in 1985. I actually had this discussion with Jason Teasley when we talked about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles a couple of weeks back. Turtles were my favorite. I very much loved the Transformers. I, for the longest time, had a bag of Transformers, and I could have so much fun with those. I really could. I mean, it captured the imagination. It's a lot of fun. The TV show was a lot of fun. I wouldn't say it was great, but it was fun, and that's really all you can ask for. And as I've mentioned before, the great thing about any show, you need good guys, and you need bad guys who make them look good. Basic pro wrestling formula, basic storytelling narrative. You have a villain who makes your heroes look great. And primarily speaking, for the Decepticons, you had Megatron, and I don't think you could have asked for a better villain. I mean, again, early 80s animation, and his voice was a tad grating. It just oddly kind of amplified and screwed with. Again, 80s technology, folks. What are you going to do? But he was always, the quality of his voice actually kind of contributed to making him seem evil. Because on the Autobot side, you had the great Peter Cullen doing the voice of Optimus Prime. Let me say this. Of all the things Michael Bay got wrong with the Transformers movies, and that's why we're talking about these guys this week, because Transformers Age of Extinction came out. But of all the things he did wrong, there's a myriad of them that I imagine will be discussed at length across various forums, and have been and will be in the future. Getting Peter Cullen back to do Optimus Prime was just a really good idea, really just stroke of genius, just a really great decision. And she had Peter Cullen doing Optimus Prime, the calm, steady, little bit of righteous fire when the time came, as all baby faces have, if I could delve into a little pro wrestling parlance. And on the other side, you had who was always scheming and getting out the skin of his teeth. But again, the voice quality difference from the early cartoon. If you didn't know anything, if you heard Optimus Prime speak and you heard Megatron speak, you knew immediately, regardless of dialogue, of what was actually said, tonality of the voices, you could tell who was the good guy and who was the bad guy. And it was just, again, the Transformers series was actually streaming on Netflix for a while, the 80s cartoon. And listening to it now, it takes a bit of adjustment. You got to get used to it, get into the flow of, some of the conversations between him and Starscream. If you're not a fan of, manipulated like that, it can set Keith on edge a little bit. And, but again, he's a purely evil character in the sense he believes his way is best, and the best villains are somewhat believe they're justified in their actions. That's true across all media. Or I suppose the one exception to that kind of rule is if you're just flat out crazy, then the rules are different. But Megatron was not crazy, and he just if you follow this series, initially they were blasted to Earth, millions of years ago, and now they're trying to get home. And Megatron's solution to this problem is, well, we will rape and pillage the Earth for all of its natural resources, and we will convert it into Energon, which we will then use to return to our home planet Cybertron. And with the Autobots up here, we can conquer Cybertron completely. And he doesn't care about how many people he kills, who he hurts. That's his goal. And if he can extinguish the life of the Autobots along the way, so much the better. And we kind of progress from there, and he and Optimus Prime are always at war. But Megatron was such a great villain in the sense that there's no redeeming quality. He's just, a little bit megalomaniacal, and speak properly. Some words, difficult to wrap the tongue around if you don't use them regularly. And I don't have too many occasions to use the phrase megalomaniacal. I need more. I need more excuses to that word. But there's no redeeming quality. He's a coward. He'll fight Optimus Prime when he has the advantage. He takes no responsibility for the failures of his plots and his schemes. He constantly berates and abuses all of his underlings. The lone exception was Soundwave. He had some respect to that guy, but your communications guy, you've always got to tread a little lightly around. But everyone else, Starscream is second in command, and he berates them all the time, abuses them. There's nothing redeeming about him, and that's one of the hallmarks of a great villain. Irredeemable. And the fact that he transformed into a gun, come on. There's something to be said for that. This is not a liberal or an anti-gun rant, everybody out there, but firearms serve a singular purpose. When discharged, they are designed to strike a target with great velocity, normally a living target, and the hope is to extinguish life. Now, however you use it, for whatever purpose, I suppose you can put me on the pro-gun side. I believe responsible firearm ownership is something that you should look into. I don't want to get in. It's not a political debate. I'm just saying a gun serves a singular purpose. So a guy who transforms into a firearm, there's a lot to be, you understand a lot of that right away. Of all the things he could have transformed into, you have fighter jets and you have various vehicles, cars, airplanes, helicopters, anything he could transform into. This guy thought gun. And, again, that says pretty much all you need to know about the guy right there. But he was, and a couple of iterations that he's gone through. All right, let me say this. And I don't know if this will be constituted as a spoiler alert for anyone out there who hasn't seen Age of Extinction, but they introduced Galvatron. Now, to anyone who knows about Transformers, we already know Galvatron is just Megatron in a new body. I imagine there are some people out there to whom that little bit of revelation in Age of Extinction might be a twist. I don't know. If so, I apologize for spilling a movie that is designed purely around visuals and has no storytelling and plot elements whatsoever. I don't feel bad about that. I really don't. So if I spoiled that for you, I'm sorry. It won't ruin your enjoyment of it, I can promise. But Galvatron was actually first introduced in the, I want to say 1984, Transformers the movie animated film. And in a fun little bit of, I don't know, I suppose you could call it continuity, Galvatron in that movie, and as a brief aside, to anyone out there who hasn't seen it, I'm sure this movie's on YouTube. Watch it, please. It's good. I've mentioned this before. The death of Optimus Prime in that movie, which occurs in the first act. Now, that movie was meant to run kind of concurrent. It was a break between seasons for the television show, and the show picked the movie left off when its next season started. So you have that. But after, 20 minutes, I would say at most, 20 to 30, Optimus Prime dies, and you have an emotional response, much more so than you did when he died in the second Transformers movie directed by Michael Bay, which had, by that point, closing in on 3 hours of screen time with Optimus and character development opportunities, and it meant nothing. 3 minutes in this movie, the guy dies, and you feel it. It tugs at your hearts. I mean, but anyway, my point being, Megatron also kind of dies in that exchange and is transformed by Unicron, who is a complete... I really hope... Part of me is Michael Bay decides in one of his successive Transformers movies that we need Unicron. Because apparently Marvel won't give us Galactus. You know what? I want Unicron. Different story. I'll get to it in a second. But Megatron is offloaded forcibly by some of the Decepticons after a battle, along with a bunch of other Transformers. And he's found by Unicron and turned into Galvatron. A lot more powerful. And that version of Galvatron is voiced by Leonard Nimoy, who went on to voice Sentinel Prime in Transformers Dark of the Moon. But, so again, fun little bit of continuity with Leonard Nimoy. Great Leonard Nimoy. Everyone loves Leonard Nimoy, right? Anyway, my point being, so again, to anyone who knows that, Galvatron is actually Megatron. My apologies, again, if that's spoiled, but they wound up reverting him to Megatron anyway, because Megatron had a bunch of established character, and I think Galvatron was destroyed by Hot Rod anyway. To rewatch the movie. That movie has a Weird Al Yankovic song that it plays in this, not just in the soundtrack, it's actually done over a couple of sequences. Any movie that's willing to do that, okay, you have to love that. So, again, I have to encourage you to see it. I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube, so give it a look. But, again, Megatron to Galvatron, and the Galvatron version is actually more destructive. Instead of turning into a Walther PPK, which I think is what actually Megatron turned into, because who doesn't want to be James Bond? In the case of Megatron, I'll just be the firearm. He actually is, Galvatron transforms into a land cannon. He looks like an piece of anti-tank artillery, which people who play a lot of like RTS strategy games have seen and whatnot. That's what he chooses to turn into, and just a purely destructive force. And I think honestly that was one of my problems with the first two Transformers movies, and I actually can find enjoyment in the Michael Bay Transformers. I can. Okay, there's plot holes, there's way too much Shia LaBeouf and Megan Fox, and inklings of the fact that Michael Bay does not view the Transformers as characters, but rather as props, and all of those problems that come up associated with that mindset. I can enjoy that movie just kind of for stupid entertainment. I can, and I don't feel bad about it. Maybe a little. You don't really have a lot of villains in that. I mean, you spend a lot of time with, the Scorpion Transformer that chases the soldiers through the desert. You're told that, we have Megatron, but, you need a villain. And there's just not a whole lot of, actual villainy going on there. When there is a villain, when one of the Decepticons does show up, it doesn't mean anything. They're not characters, just props. Until Megatron comes out and he turns into like an X-Wing, which is pretty cool, not gonna lie. The fact that he's, instead of just, turning into a cannon, he's an extraterrestrial fighter. Apparently that's what inspired George Lucas. I don't know. We'll see, Lucas. But, again, he's off screen for just the final battle sequence, then he's defeated, then he shows up again for the second one a little bit, and we discover, no, it's not the end-all be-all. There's, what's that guy's name? The Fallen One. He's kind of pulling Megatron's strings a little bit, and it's just kind of a mess as far as those movies. But I'm not just reviewing the movies. That's actually the guys at The Long Road to Ruin will be tackling that this Tuesday. So tune in for that. It'll be it's Mark Radlich's big return. So you should all listen. I will encourage that a great deal. And anyway, my point in all this, the fact that by the third movie, Megatron is now a Mad Max-esque Mack truck wandering the deserts of Africa, and he then plays second fiddle to an evil Sentinel Prime. I don't know why Michael Bay can't seem to just let Megatron be kind of the end-all, be-all. It's a little bit baffling because he's such a great character. I will say this. Since Michael Bay decided he wasn't going to go with the tradition, the voice that Megatron had in the comics, and it's probably a good thing that he did. I mean, I know there's some people out there who love that show. I don't think we could have that voice. I really don't. Yeah, we like it for nostalgia, which means we view it or listen to it with rose-colored glasses or hearing aids, if you want to extend the metaphor to the auditory sense. Yeah, you couldn't have it done. So the fact that they got Hugo Weaving was probably the best bit of voice casting you could have done in that instance. And I'm a big Hugo, and it has nothing to do with The Matrix. All right? My enjoyment of Hugo Weaving, my real enjoyment of him as a performer started when I saw him in V for Vendetta. And the fact that he's able to act while having a mask over his face the entire time and still able to convey emotion. Really, I became a fan of the guys. And so that's where my fandom started for Hugo Weaving. I mean, he wasn't bad as Agent Smith, but I don't care much for those movies, which is just me. Good as Elrond, and I was, again, incidentally, his casting as the Red Skull in Captain America, the First Avenger, was really great. I'm sad he's not going to come back. Because it likely means we can't get the Red Skull back. I don't know who they'd get to play him if you couldn't get Hugo Weaving back to do it. Anyway, rambling just a bit. So, anyway, but back on track. Hugo Weaving's voice actor for Megatron was a really solid choice. He just started meaning less and less. I mean, you spent the whole first movie trying to keep Megatron from being reactivated. Then he was reactivated, thawed. I just froze in the first movie. He gets reactivated, he gets beaten, they dump him in the Challenger Trench, or the Challenger Deep, which is a section of the Marianas Trench off the coast of it's off the Marianas Islands. It's the deepest point in the world. I mean, it's like 6 or 7 miles down. Huge depth. God, it's crazy. So they decide to dump him there. Then in the opening act of the second movie, he gets revived and goes on to play Second Banana to the Fallen. And then again, by the time we get to the third one, Megatron means almost nothing. He's a broken down shell rumbling around, masquerading as an African warlord's, chariot. I mean, it's ridiculous. And then he saves Optimus at the end, which just boggled my mind. It's really confusing to me. The Age of Extinction will correct a little bit of that. We'll let Galvatron just be kind of an uber badass. Or, I'll say that again, there's nothing redeemable about Megatron. Or Galvatron, for that. It's the same character. It's a little different name, different body, but it's the same guy. It's supposed to have a whole lot of redeeming qualities. So again, I'm hoping that he gets to be kind of the centralized villain again, and it would be so nice to let him kind of be the bad guy. And, I mean, this movie is going to make gobs of money. We're going to get, Transformers 5 and 6, I have to assume. Apparently they've signed contracts with Mark Wahlberg and the associated people for 2 more movies. I don't want to see Mark Wahlberg in another movie. We don't. But that's a different topic. And so to kind of further my point about Michael Bay, and I don't want to turn to this being a bash fest on Michael Bay because he's made some movies I've enjoyed. And I want to critique the films. My point here is, as I mentioned, he views the Transformers as characters. If you were a fan of the series, you knew Starscream was different from Megatron, was different from Soundwave, and they had unique interactions. And, I mean, the Starscream-Megatron relationship is one of the most offbeat and potentially hilarious pairings ever. Because Starscream is just completely cowed by Megatron anytime he tries to do anything, yet is always trying to usurp him. And Megatron knows he's trying to usurp him, yet for some reason keeps around, I suppose because he's kind of good at his job. I don't know. But there's so much in that relationship. I mean, it's Starscream that actually gets Megatron and the other injured Decepticons launched off of their, like a space-traveling train in the animated movie. Then he crowns himself king of the Decepticons. Actually has a crowning ceremony. I mean, their contentious relationship is just one of the most amusing and entertaining and interesting things that they do. And the movies capitalize on almost none of that. I mean, after Megatron gets revived, he gets like a jab at Starscream, and then when he comes back in the second, he actually gets a great line. After he is revived, he returns to the remnants of Cybertron, and he grabs Starscream by the throat and gets the line that even in death there is no command but mine. Again, there's so much that those two did together. that you could have done on screen. And Michael Bay loves to throw comedy, pointless comedy, into his action movies. Hot Brownies being an example of that, or Shia LaBeouf's talking about, diesel tongues. I mean, pointless comedy in your movie. If you got Megatron and Starscream, I imagine there's some alternate universe where those two characters were spun off into a sitcom, an animated 30-minute sitcom just featuring those two, probably on Fox, and it went on to do like blockbuster ratings for a few seasons. I mean, that's the relationship that they had. You could play so many different ways. And I bring up Soundwave, and kind of the same thing, because Soundwave was pretty awesome. I don't say that about a whole lot of the Decepticons. They're the villains. But Soundwave was like the exact opposite of his Autobot counterpart, and I forget his name. I apologize up there. If anyone knows it, feel free to hit me up. But he was their communications guy. Both of them. This is 80s, mind you, everyone. So be gentle to the technology. But they were not even boomboxes. They were like cassette players. That's what they transformed into. And they had micro cassettes that they stored in their chest cap, and they would open them up and they would launch them out, and they had a bunch of Transformers that were micro cassettes. I mean, Laserbeak was kind of the famous one. Again, 80s, be kind to the technology, and I say Soundwave was cool. He had probably the best voice, and when they butchered it, oh god. The sequence in Transformer, the second one, Revenge of the Fallen, he takes over one of the satellites above Earth, and they do his voice, and it's awful. I mean, it's just overly distorted, overly computerized, and horrible. I mean, the decision to have Macintalk provide the voice of the autopilot in the movie made more sense and sounded better than what they gave to Soundwave. Real bad. But again, he's a distinct and separate character. And they were all fought, and they all had their interactions. And it's just really sad that these movies use them as props. Especially sad when they use them as props for, Shia LaBeouf or Mark Wahlberg or Patrick Dempsey for some odd reason. Who thought that was? I've ranted on that before. I'm not going to get it. Although I could, since he's a Transformers villain. God, is there a less menacing guy in the world than Patrick Dempsey? And I don't necessarily mean that as insult, but come on. That guy can't be menacing. It's just not in him. I mean, if you've seen Transformers Dark Moon, and I have, I actually think the last third of that movie, give or take, when they're just having the battle sequence in Chicago, is actually a well-thought-out, well-constructed battle sequence. And then you have Shia LaBeouf fighting Patrick Dempsey in the middle of all this. I was waiting for them to slap fight. Seriously, and I don't have anything against Patrick Dempsey. I really don't. I don't think he can be menacing. And that's a problem when you're supposed to be a villain. Supposed to be a little menace. Or you're just the Bobby Heenan Weasel role, when you have no menace but always hide behind a bodyguard. And he didn't have that either. He was supposed to be a little bit menacing, and he doesn't have it in him. Okay, not a knock on Patrick Dempsey. I got nothing against the guy. He's perfectly fine in certain roles. Menacing, evil corporate tycoon who decides to destroy the planet is not one of them. I mentioned Unicron a while ago, since just to kind of get back to the animated movie. You know what? Again, Marvel apparently will not give us a decent representation of Galactus. I say, Michael Bay, to the unpaid intern listening to this podcast, because I know there's at least one of you out there. Tell Michael Bay, or tell your superior, who will tell his superior, who will tell his superior, who will tell Steven Spielberg to tell Michael Bay, do Unicron. You have your movies are nothing but visual. I don't even want to say candy. It's like mediocre candy. This is off-brand, near the border candy. That goes for either border, by the way, because Canadians have some weird candy. I don't mean to insult all the Canadians. I mean, weird is relative. But this is, again, visual, kind of off-brand eye candy. That's what we get out of these movies, and they make, billions of dollars. Far be it from me. You can do Unicron. And for those of you who don't know, Unicron is a giant transformer who eats planets. He's Galactus, but instead of a ship that makes him, bigger or smaller, and he has the funky hat, instead of the hat and the ship and the herald, and I turn planets into antimatter, or instead of random giant space cloud, look, to the guys who did Silver Surfer, if you wish to make Galactus instead of the guy with the hat, don't don't go with amorphous space cloud. You could have so easily done I brought this up before, do a Lovecraftian tentacle monster type thing. That would work. You don't need to just be Space Cloud. Come on, put some effort into this. And again, if you don't want guy in the suit with the big purple hat, I understand that. You could have done so much more than you did. And it's just a little bit sad. My point being, giant transformer who in his kind of dormant state looks a little bit like the Matrix of Leadership. Not Michael Bay's Matrix of Leadership, mind you, which is a little bit new age and funky, a little biomechanical inspirations. But the original Matrix of Leadership, you take that, and he latches onto planets and consumes them. And when he attacks Cybertron, he transforms into his robot form, and he's like, it's actually a really cool visual of him standing on the planet, swatting at the little guy trying to stop him. But Michael Bay, you could do this. I have no doubt that with the gobs of money you've made, you could decide that you want to do a Unicron storyline, and he is coming to consume the Earth. If I can't get a good representation of Galactus, I will trust that you could do a half-decent representation of Unicron. That's my hope, okay? That's pretty much all I'm asking for out of it. I don't know who you'd get to voice him. In the animated movie, actually, I believe it was the great Orson Welles who provides the voice of Unicron. The talent in this. You need to watch that movie just for the exchanges between Unicron and Galvatron, just so you can hear Orson Welles talk to Leonard Nimoy. There are certain wonderful vocal exchanges that you need to listen to just because they sound awesome, and that's one of them. But, again, giant robot that eats planets to fuel. This shouldn't be complicated. We could finally get Transformers in space, because he's on a course for Earth, and the Autobots, and I assume Mark Wahlberg, because he's contractually obligated to be in the movie. But you have a couple of humans, and you have a few Autobots, and they go out to try and stop Unicron. And we can get Transformers in space. Come on, you can smell the money. I know you can. All right. And who else did I want to talk about as far as the Decepticons go? Because, again, you have some of these that Starscream actually led a squadron of fighter jets that were essentially recolored versions of Starscream. But they were different, they were all different characters. I mean, Starscream was in charge, but he was kind of whiny and a little snivelly, and the others were, constantly trying to actually do the right thing. The other one I wanted to touch on briefly. I wanted to touch briefly on Devastator, and there's a reason for that. To anyone who watched the TV show, Devastator was a big deal. Now, Devastator was a giant transformer who was formed by the Destructicons merging together. Now, the Destructicons were a group of 6 or 7 Transformers who they were construction equipment. You had, the cement mixer and the backhoe and the bulldozer. You had a bunch of them. And they were all strong in their own right. And they would occasionally merge to form Giant Devastator, who was huge. I mean, you imagine, you've all seen how much bigger Transformers are than we are. And they all come together and they form Devastator, and massive. And his only weakness is he's comprised of, again, 6 or 7 individuals who can be distracted and then, break apart. But he's just a monstrous presence. And I suppose, hypothetically, we got a bit of Devastator in Revenge of the Fallen. How, you might ask? What to which of these random CGI'd monstrosities am I referencing? Well, in this case, that would be the one that climbs up the pyramid, starts tearing it down, and is shot by the railgun. This is also the one who, for some reason, Michael Bay decided, we've got Transformers. They need balls. It's not a joke, ladies and gentlemen. To anyone who's seen that movie, you may have blocked it from your mind. But for some reason, on their version of Devastator, when John Turturro climbs up after him to sight in the railgun that's on the U.S., and again, in this case, it's a giant projectile weapon. It's a railgun. But when John Turturro shows up, follows it, he positions himself under it to get the best potential trajectory and the readings and everything. And when asked if he's close enough and if he has a good read on it, he looks up, and for some reason, we see robotic testicle. No. Just no. Devastator is massive and a force to be reckoned with, and he's meant to be a big deal when he shows up. He doesn't show up all that often. And your response to this, giant amongst robots. This is a giant robot that makes other giant robots look normal. I mean, and your response is, okay, we'll form him up. He will try to eat the urban robots, which everyone should be cheering for anyway, because they're so obnoxious. And then we're going to decide robot testicle. I don't understand. I don't get it. And then he gets blown apart by the railgun, and there's an airstrike, and all that fun stuff. I mean, it's like, that's the rough equivalent. I suppose I'll go a little bit of pro wrestling on you here. That's the rough equivalent of, we've booked Andre the Giant to show up at our professional wrestling event, and he will wear a flesh-colored bodysuit and be pinned in, and he will then be taken to the limit by El Torito, and there's a Hornswoggle run-in. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, and from what I understand of Age of Extinction, we suffer from the same thing. I mean, you have Galvatron, who's Megatron, but some of the primary villainy doesn't come from Galvatron, or even the force that is trying to wipe out. I mean, it's supposed to be extinction, right? They're threatening to wipe out humanity. And apparently, like, the primary villains are Kelsey Grammer as a CIA operative who I don't get it. You have to shoehorn humans in? Really? You're trying to wipe out humanity, and we have humans helping this. I mean, this makes sense if you are a fanatical cultist. For anyone who listens to this who knows Lovecraft, the disciples of Azathoth, they're crazy. They know his sole purpose is destruction. If to anyone who knows like Cthulhu mythos and whatnot, Azathoth is one of his deities, his elder gods, and the sole purpose of this being is to consume and destroy everything. That's it. There's no bright light. There's no favored pet. There's no I'll rule over the slave. I'll be the human liaison between the slaves and you. No. He wipes things out. Now, in this Transformers movie, we have something that wishes to wipe out humanity. And our primary villains for the humans, we have humans that we have to follow who think this is a good idea. And these are not insane cultists. These are not crazy people. These are hypothetically somewhat sane, high-ranking members in international business or the intelligence community. And they think, well, if we turn the entire planet into a new Cybertron and human life is extinguished, this will be a good... All I ask out of my villains is a little consistency. I don't know why that's too much to ask in some cases. Now, for Galvatron and the Decepticons, this makes perfect sense. For, who's the guy? Lockdown, Lock-On, something like that. There's a Transformers bounty hunter who is working at the behest of whatever life form created the Transformers. I'll give you that. Makes a little bit of sense. Evil robots wish to colonize Earth, wish to wipe out humanity. Thumbs up. Makes sense. Evil bounty hunting robot that... Oh, look, Optimus Prime is, for whatever reason, to these creators or whatnot, worth a lot of money. You're a bounty hunter. Makes sense. I'm down. Humans who decide... Well, we have this object that will turn massive amounts of our planet into this cybernetic organisms, and our lives as we know it will end, and we'll probably be wiped out, and I'm going to support this. I don't get it. I just don't get it. It makes no sense. I just want sense. That's all I want. A little bit of logic. Just a little bit. Oh, and it just depressed. All right. But I will say this. I have as far as Age of Extinction goes, I don't have a whole lot up, and part of that is, hey, look, Optimus Prime is riding Grimlock. Oy. Which brings me, I'll divert briefly to the Dinobot. Now, this is an instance wherein the cartoon did a bit of a disservice to the Dinobots, because they turned Grimlock, for the purposes that he's the Tyrannosaurus. That's what he transformed. And in the comic, and in the cartoon, he does a lot of, me Grimlock, me Smash. I mean, worse than the Hulk, okay? Dialogue that you get from the Hulk across movies, any of them, almost, is better than what we get out of Grimlock in that television, and it's sad. But the Dinobots don't get along all that well with either the Autobots or the Decepticons. They have been known to fight either. they tend to side with the Autobots more just based on philosophy, I guess. That's where their morals lie. But there is no way Grimlock would allow Optimus Prime to ride him into battle. They were not... but my point there is, the Dinobots have fought the Autobots, too. There's not again, the allegiances there are temporary when their goals align. It happens more often than not, but they've fought, and the Dinobots, you don't deal with them. They're, they'll take your head off. There's some badasses in that group. And actually some of the interesting stuff when they fight, which, again, they have, the Dinobots, they're on pretty much an even keel with, some of the best Autobots have to offer. Again, they're not pushovers. So if you want, but again, they're not subservient to Optimus Prime. They're not part of the Autobot collective. They are their own entity. And again, they've fought the Autobots, but produces some interesting results. But so my point being, Grimlock being ridden by Optimus Prime. I get that all the 13-year-olds out there see Optimus Prime riding a T-Rex into battle and are just, yes, this is awesome. It's awesome if they're props. And since that's all Michael Bay uses them for, fine and dandy. If they're characters, if they're sentient beings with personalities, and you know a bit of the backstory, it almost causes you physical pain. All right. But that's my brief rant on that. Okay. I've talked a lot about, again, the animated movie. I've touched on some of the Michael Bay stuff. Okay. I want to briefly discuss the second and third Michael Bay installments of the franchise. Because, again, I haven't talked a whole lot about the villains. And let's go ahead and delve into it. Again, Megatron playing second fiddle to the Fallen in Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. I was a little... Again, I think Megatron is a strong enough villain on his own to be the bad guy. But if he's going to play Second Banana, why would he play Second Banana to this decrepit robot who does nothing but sit around? I mean, that's actually all the Fallen does for most of this movie. He is in his throne on Cybertron. I imagine he started to petrify Jill a little bit. And he is staying here because he knows there's some prophecy, I assume, that only Prime can kill him. Let me say this. I don't like those types of things. And my lone exception to this is the realm of pure fantasy, and even then it gets a tad old because the prophecy is what starts the whole book or chain of books or whatnot, and then it comes back. And anyway, it bugs me just a little bit. But his response is, okay, I'm safe here. I will wait until all the primes are dead. And then, and this is what kills me. He's portrayed as a bit, old. He's been around for a long time and a little bit broken down. And I assume he hasn't moved all that much over a 1,000 or so year period because there's a prime out there. And if I leave the sanctuary of my little cave here, I will be in danger. And then as soon as Optimus Prime dies, he becomes young and virile, and the spirit of the Prime has now imbued him with all sorts of youthful energy, and now I'm ready to conquer the world. And then, it's not even really Optimus Prime that beats him, it's Optimus Prime having been fused with this Scottish, Optimus Prime Fire, after he's fused with the guy who was the Blackbird. And that's what finally, and I don't get it, he is portrayed during this battle sequence, when he shows up, the Fallen kicks all kinds of ass. Apparently he can't crush Shia LaBeouf, despite a 40-minute sequence where the poor little guy tries to run a 30-yard stretch. This is not football, wherein I accept the fact that it will more than likely take an hour to move 30 yards. In the realm of American football, I kind of understand that that's what happened. But in the movies, and again, he shows up and he beats he's, a force of nature type of thing. He is crushing all opposition. Then Optimus Prime shows up and he is paralyzed by fear, and Prime tears him in half in like 2 minutes. I mean, it's a little awkward. It was an odd choice for a villain. It just, I don't know, it didn't work. Again, you have Megatron. If you're going to bring him back, let him be the villain. It's just kind of my thought process as far as that goes. If you wanted Starscream to rally the Fallen and Starscream kind of ups up as a character while Megatron's incapacitated, makes more sense. Because Starscream as the primary villain is a tad laughable. Him as the lackey to the Fallen. Makes a lot more sense. Megatron, not so much. But, again, I'm not... And here's the flip side of this. I actually liked the again, pro wrestling terms, I liked the heel turn from Sentinel Prime in Dark of the Moon. There's a lot about that movie I don't like. I've mentioned before, but I can enjoy the third act. Again, I like good battles. I mean, the whole, the third act of the Avengers is just the Battle of New York, and it's well constructed, well done battle sequence, and I enjoy it. I can enjoy these things, and that leads me, and so I can enjoy that. But his heel turn, he's brought up as, kind of Optimus Prime's mentor. He was a good guy. He was a leader. All these things, and you have Leonard Nimoy's voice lending some gravitas to this. And he decides that humanity is less valuable than revitalizing Cybertron. Makes perfect sense when presented logically. Here's a guy who looks at humanity and sees all the terrible things that we do, and let's be honest with ourselves, everybody, there's a lot of bad things that humanity does, and decides your life is less valuable to me, your planet is worth less, can be, slave labor. I'm going to transport my planet here, and we're going to start over. And believe it or not, that makes sense. The arc of the hero falling, when presented logically, works, and I liked that. Sentinel Prime turning on Optimus, making Decepticons, bow to him because he's powerful. I liked it. It all made sense from a narrative standpoint. His position was presented logically. Plenty of other issues. Oh, so many. But again, the reveal of him as the bad guy, his turn, I liked. I was down with that. And then, of course, Optimus is being able to beat him at the end. Help from Megatron. It baffles my mind a little bit that Megatron turn on Sentinel. That makes perfect sense. That's what Megatron does. Bad guy. Turns on everybody. That's what he does. Especially if he's placed in a subservient second fiddle role. Again, Megatron, big deal. Likes to be in charge. Got an ego. And so him turning on Sentinel, perfect sense. Turning on Sentinel to help Optimus, not so much. Makes less sense. But again, a well-executed, kind of swerve there. And again, if his presentation makes sense as a villain, I'm okay to go along with it. And his reason for being a bad guy made sense. Sadly, it meant, again, this is my issue, it made Megatron second fiddle again, and there's all the other crap in that movie that goes along with that. But as a villain, Sentinel Prime being presented as a good guy, turning on Optimus, getting his comeuppance, that, little bit of story in that movie worked. I liked it. That was saving graces. You can also find a few, I think. So, good on that. And again, my message before I close out here to Michael Bay, if you're doing another one of these, and more than likely you are, Unicron. Think about it. That's all I ask. Giant robot floating through space eating planets. This is directly up your alley. That's all I'm saying. So please consider that. Get James Earl Jones to do the voice. That would work. All right. Or have him be silent. I mean, that would work as well. All right. Thank you all so very much for listening. That's going to start wrapping up here. So, here at the Religion Broadcasting Network, the big man is back. The mortified, mandated reporter who hates pants more than I hate Ben Stiller. I don't think anything hates anyone more than I hate Ben Stiller, but I believe Mark has that deep hatred of pants. Mark Radulich is back this Tuesday. He's returning the long road to ruin, and he and Sean Comer, I'm pretty sure this is accurate, by the way. I might be off by a week. But I believe this week he's returning. He and Sean Comer are going to tackle the Transformers franchise. So if you're a fan of The Long Road to Ruin, welcome Mark back. Listen to that show. Have a lot of fun. All things will be well. I host the 411 Ground and Pound radio show live every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Up this week will be reviews. The reviews of UFC Fight Night 43 and UFC Fight Night 44, both of which come your way live this Saturday. I actually have coverage of one of those. UFC Fight Night 44, Swanson versus Stevens. I'll have coverage over on 411mania.com in the MMA section. I haven't had a column the last couple of weeks. I've been a bit under the weather. I've been looking for some work. There's been a lot of that stuff. I apologize. I will have something this upcoming week. I'm back on the horse. I feel good. I feel rejuvenated. So look for that. Be sure to check out the Radulich Broadcasting Network for all your podcasting needs. We've got something for everybody. So tune in. find us. We're great. And that's going to wrap me up. I don't think I have anything else to... Well, okay. I'm going to plug the other show. Every other Tuesday, the Metal Hammer of Doom comes to you live. Mark's back, so that's him and Robert Cooper coming to you every other Tuesday. I was a special guest on the Metal Hammer of Doom a couple of weeks back. Mark and I reviewed Sabaton's album Heroes, so give that a listen if you're a fan of metal. Metal Hammer of Doom is a great show. Jason Teasley holds things down on the sports side with From the Cheap Seats every Thursday. That's going to be shifting around in the near future. I'll keep you appraised of that. Again, The Long Road to Ruin this Tuesday. Mark Radulich is back in the saddle. He and Sean Comer. I don't have to host the show. Woohoo! I loved hosting it. I like the guys over there. Sean and for the last show talking about the Nightmare on Elm Street, we had Benjamin J. Cologne on. They were great. I just didn't like running 3 shows. I was happy to kind of take a step back from hosting that every other week, in addition to this one and the Ground and Pound show. So I'll be tuning in. Be fun to hear those guys talk. Nice to welcome Mark back in an official capacity. So tune in for all of those. I think that's everything. Let's see. My show, I'll be back here next week, of course. Every Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern. Tentative plan next week is time-traveling villains. So I keep saying that. One of these times it's going to be right. So keep an eye open for that. Should be a lot of fun when that show comes around. The interim, that's going to wrap us up here. All right. Everybody, again, thank you so very much for joining us, for listening in. I appreciate all the listens I can get. If you want feedback, that fun stuff, on Twitter, I am at Winfree MMA, Winfree MMA. My last name is a compound word. Why? I had to explain that for so long that my name is not spelled the same as Oprah's. Sad. And I don't think there's any relation either. Or you can find me on Facebook. I don't know how many Robert Winfrees there are out there, but I appreciate feedback, constructive criticisms. Again, I only ask, if all you have is a long list of profanities and telling me that I suck, I imagine you can find a better use for your time. And I would encourage you to do so. I've tried to cut down on the long list of profanity-laden messages I send other people, because my time can be better used, and so can everyone else's. So that's it for me. That's it for my plugs. Again, Sunday, this Saturday, I'll have live coverage in the MMA Zone of 411 Mania. So come by, say hi. There might be pictures of chickens. Could be a lot of fun. And this Sunday, the Ground and Pound show, which coincidentally is a call-in show. So if you wish to do so, you're more than welcome to. Again, call-in show. But that's going to wrap it up for me. Thank you again for listening. I'm going to remind you that you need a bad guy, everybody. Hulk Hogan without Bobby Heenan over there always prodding him, not nearly as big. Superheroes without a villain is just a guy with mental disorder in tights with a cape. We don't need more of those. All right? I will see you guys back here next week. And again, thank you for listening.
So say good night to the bad guy.